My next guest is Joe Reed. He is the founder of Pulse, a student support platform built for K-12 school leaders who are tired of reacting to problems they could have seen coming. His background is in social impact and community development. He spent years working with under-resourced communities and kept running into the same wall. By the time anyone had a clear picture of what was happening with the people they were serving, it was already a crisis. He started building Pulse to close the gap for schools first because that's where the need is most urgent and where the tools have missed the mark. Pulse is built on a simple conviction: educators should be in the classroom, not buried in spreadsheets. They help school leaders spot struggling students earlier, cut through administrative noise, and get back to what they actually came to do: teach, coach, and build relationships with kids. Welcome to the podcast, Joe.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, we'll start off with a question I ask everyone. Tell me about a time you were in the trenches and managed to crawl out.
Sure. So I was serving overseas internationally in South Africa, and my family was there for about 5 years. And we faced a lot of different things over the course of that 5 years. Specifically, there was a lot of violence in the community where we lived, and often we would run into financial crisis or just safety crises as we were going around our work. And one of the things that became really, really helpful for us was just the building of our network of support around us locally and building a stronger community, as well as just being able to begin to identify what some of the tools and processes that were needed in those communities and how they could actually help build self-sufficiency for not only us, but for the community we were serving.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So kind of in your roles throughout your career, you've worked a lot with entrepreneurship. So in terms of in schools and shaping cultures in that network, how have you learned to leverage entrepreneurship to shape cultures and maybe think about within a school how you could advise teachers or leaders?
Yeah, I think one of the things I have a lot of friends that are teachers and in the classroom, and we talk about this a lot. A lot of the quote unquote difficult students that they have in their class actually have quite a brilliant mind behind them. And often they're bored. And so it's coming out in different ways that are less productive, if you will. And one of the things that I've talked about with a couple of my friends has been actually giving students like what is the problem that you're currently facing right now in school, not just you, but like what are things that are broken in this community at large, and what are ways that you could begin to solve that. And so really beginning to give a problem and solution conversation to an entrepreneurial student and letting that be a project for them to begin to kind of think their way forward into a situation. We've seen several students, there's always the programs like Build is an awesome program here in Boston. A very dear friend of mine is the executive director of that. They put entrepreneurship in the classroom and
Mm-hmm,
stuff like that's been really, really proven to be very, very helpful. But without those programs, what we're finding is students are actually starting little side businesses and it's keeping them busy and it's triggering something in their creative part of their brain that's
mm-hmm,
actually having an impact not only in their classroom, but in their home life and in their community at large. So if we can harness that creative energy towards the common good, then that's where I think things come. And ultimately, entrepreneurship is just identifying problems
mm-hmm,
and building comprehensive solutions around it, right? So, and who better than the people living in the problem to be the
mm-hmm,
ones that actually build the solution?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, when you're working with entrepreneurs or you're working in a team, talk to me a little bit about outsourcing and how you take a team-based approach.
Sure. So, let me think through that a second. I know you're going to be editing some of
Hmm.
this. Yeah, so I think what we've learned is that when we are able to really clearly identify the problem, but not just state it in a sentence, get
Hmm.
underneath the surface of that problem. Why does this problem exist? What
Hmm.
else is connected to this problem? Because
Hmm.
there are systems around a problem that are contributing to it being a real thing in the society. And so when we understand the ecosystem around the actual problem statement, and we have people in the room we can begin to identify, okay, your strengths are here, your strengths are here.
Mhm.
When we come together with this comprehensive plan, who's taking what responsibility for which part of this? And
Mhm.
then how are we going to build a workflow around one another in this situation? So, that a lot of that becomes really critical. And so we actually sit, my teams that I oversee end up sitting on the outside of those problems and outside of those businesses more and more. And we're providing more consultative services to it. So, real-time example, we have a situation in Nigeria that I've been walking with this group for a number of years in our Africa-based work.
Mhm.
And one of the big problems that they continue to have in their community outreach work, people are coming out of really traumatic experiences, like more so than I think any of us really can understand, the
Mhm.
violence and the craziness around it. One of the things that we identified was that the brain patterns were they might be coming in and trying to do new things in their way,
Mhm.
but the way that their brains had been wired was to go after crime. That's all they had seen their whole life from childhood on. And so what we had to begin to do was help them rewire their brain and figure out new ways forward that were productive for the communities where they live. So we
Mhm.
actually helped them first identify, how do we build a job training program and an entrepreneurship training program kind of side by side? Because not everyone's very entrepreneurial by
Mhm.
nature. Everyone should learn those skills, I believe, but recognize that that may not be who you are, but you have a part to play in a bigger conversation around,
Mhm.
an entrepreneurial activity. So we helped them build that program out. And then what we identified from there was the realization that we have to fund that training program. So
Mhm.
what if we take some of our highest level clients and actually build a social enterprise around it, where now that we're able to provide outsourcing services for all of these solutions. So I tell that story, Dana, because even with Pulse, one of the things that I was adamant about was that we were going to bootstrap this thing forward because we
Mhm.
wanted to have full hands on with the teachers in the schools and in the communities where we're working with. They should be the ones co-designing this with us. And in order to do that in an affordable way, I need an operations team that can actually hang out with me and run
Mhm.
at the same speed of what we're trying to build at the pace we're building. So I'm actually outsourcing all of my operation system to my Nigerian team, and the
Mhm.
business that they called it Solveline. They're solving my problems. So their
Mhm.
customer support, they're first in line to respond to emails and bug reports and things of that nature. So by putting all of these problems together, we're actually able to build a social network, if you will,
Mhm.
of here's another problem and a solution, but hey, somebody already solved that over here. Let's make
Mhm.
sure that we're not duplicating work and let's build these cross sections together. So that's sort of this portfolio approach that I take to social impact.
Mhm.
And where Pulse came out of was a problem we had. Where Solveline came out was where one of our partners had a problem, and we've identified solutions and we built the teams around that, and everything's firing on all cylinders over there now. So
Mhm.
it's a really exciting program for us.
So talk to me a little bit about working through the system with nonprofits, um, how you came from nonprofits to startups, and now you're in the process of building this venture to last.
Yeah, so I think what's interesting is that nonprofits that are really paying attention are right at the grassroots of where societal challenges are taking place, right?
Mhm.
So we're able to not only like name the problem, we feel the problems. Like
Mhm.
we feel
Mhm.
them inherently in our day-to-day activity. We're sitting with people that we're serving in the pain that they're going through. We are in their homes. We are in the hospitals with them. So we understand these in a way that outside um, entrepreneurs that are just looking for new ventures to start, we have a leg up on that because we have a deeper understanding of what's happening in the community, right?
Mhm.
Where a lot of this social entrepreneurship came from was recognizing that the tools and the systems that we needed in the fields where I was working directly, they just didn't exist. So we're
Mhm.
cobbling things together like Google Sheets and, forms and things like that just to monitor our impact. But it was so unhelpful when we started scaling our work across other countries. It really became impossible to do the work. So
Mhm.
now, and I think teachers can resonate with this, it felt like my full-time job became administration.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I got to get out behind this computer. I'm going to throw it through a wall.
Yeah.
I need to get back in front of people that I'm here. I was brought here to serve this community, and I'm sitting here on a Google sheet. What am I doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we just started co-creating that. I mean, Pulse has been a 15 year in the making journey for us of just living with the pain of what we need to see, and identifying the solutions around it, and then building the infrastructure around it. So that's really why I think the going from nonprofit, I mean, I'm still running a nonprofit right now. It's my full-time job.
Mm-hmm.
But all of these solutions are tools that we've needed for decades in our work. And so it's just a pleasure and a joy to be able to finally put teams together that are passionate about that impact.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, you're talking about kind of when the product goes live and how the teachers are able to focus more time with students and not on their computers. Um, how can the ed tech platform then more support the students and the teachers being off their computer?
Sure. So we were given a grant to actually build a big part of Pulse.
Okay.
And one of the things, the two challenges that I was really adamant that we paid attention to was how can we get better information from our teachers, not just
Mm-hmm.
filling out forms. I want the nuance around the classroom. So that was
Mm-hmm.
problem number one. And then problem number two is how can I get this information from them while they're lying on a couch after a very long day and they don't have to look at a computer screen? Those
Mm-hmm.
are my two priorities. So it was that's where we started the design work. And so what we've been able to do is we've built everything. The foundation of this is actually what we're calling our plan base.
Okay.
So think strategic plan, think an individualized student development plan, a school improvement plan, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we are building everything on plans,
Mm-hmm.
and we're assigning some of those plans directly to an individual, to a group, to an entire organization. Whatever way that a school wants to structure this, we're now able to structure it. So now what'll happen is that plan. So let's say that my son, his name is Malachi. He's a sophomore in high school right now, and he's going to school. And he has an individualized student development plan because he's really great at some areas of school and not as great at the other areas. So
Mm-hmm.
he and the teachers and I and the school counselors have worked on this plan together. That's all built in. Now, when the teacher has to go do a report, what'll happen is our system will actually prompt a text message to the teacher's phone.
Okay.
It will actually give them the opportunity to click a button and answer a few questions vocally. Tell us what's going on in this area, like whatever the set of questions that they
Okay.
need to answer, they can verbalize it. And now
Okay.
the idea is that we'll just be allowing this workflow to just move through your entire classroom. So if you're responsible for 20 students, okay, let's start with Malachi. Let's now go to Aiden. Let's now go to Patrick, right? And we'll
Mm-hmm.
just work through that workflow from her phone, from the teacher's phone while they're walking back to their car. And
Mm-hmm.
so what'll happen from there is now, and why that gives us better information because it allows this conversation to happen. Tell
Okay.
us, the verbal processors give us way more data than answering a form-filled question, right?
Mm-hmm.
So our system is able to take all of that information and apply what we needed to get for the reporting, but
Mm-hmm.
also add context and clarity around those answers, right? So we're trying to get more of a 360-degree view of this student. So we want to get information from the teacher, from parents, from other folks in the administration, right? So that's how we can begin to do that. But we're going a little bit further, Dana, with it. What we recognized was just gathering data is fine for reporting,
Mm-hmm.
but we need actual helpful suggestions for how to benefit the student more specifically. So the answers to their questions are showing up against that plan, and our LMS structure is actually making smart suggestions for that individual student.
Mm-hmm.
So now when the teacher comes in on the next morning and they pull up their reports, they're able to see, okay, Malachi was just given a very specific math, help guide.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm going to review it as a teacher to see if that's something I want to push over to Malachi.
Mm-hmm.
And if it is, I'll push it and I'm back into the classroom. Right. So there's still a lot of controls, the human in the loop kind of stuff. But and then further, Dana, one of the things that we're really proud of, we built this for our nonprofit folks,
Mm-hmm.
is if in the event something happens with a student, they score a certain way, there's a keyword that's mentioned, in the audio, we can set up custom notifications that send direct text messages to the right people at the right time immediately. And
Mm-hmm.
so let's say that there's something that's, a mental health scare or a crisis there. That gets flagged in the conversations and the reporting that's going on. And the school counselor is given a text with a link to the context of why they're being notified. And
Okay.
right. So now we actually have targeted supports, not only in content for student development, but in human personnel that can actually step in and help intervene. When right before that, there's going to be problems that we can't catch,
Mm-hmm.
but if we can be a lot more proactive in this response, that's what our goal was with Pulse. So
Mm-hmm.
that there's a lot of components to this Swiss Army knife, but the
Okay.
entire goal of this is to get better at information and keep teachers in the classroom with less work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Talk to me a little bit about the partnership with the African partners, and how you've worked with the outsourcing and building a vision with them.
Yeah, so they built the vision, and I asked
Mm-hmm.
a lot of really hard questions. I mean, obviously,
Okay.
I'm an American, and for them to be successful, they needed to be able to go global with their reach. So there's a lot of cross-cultural learning that they've had to go through, and they're still going through. That's not something that's just a once and done.
Mm-hmm.
They're living into how do Americans work? It's very different than how Africans work, right? And it's very different than how Europeans work. And so there's a lot of just sort of framing that up with them. I've been walking with them on each of their client engagements as a coach
Mm-hmm.
and more just saying, okay, like if I was in this person's shoes, here's why I would be saying what this person is saying to you. And here's a way that you might want to consider responding. And like, let's build systems and processes around this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're coming in very inquisitive and wanting to learn, but also really trying to build something that can last long term because their vision is that they want to set up training centers across the continent. And
Mm-hmm.
I think some of the hardest working people I've ever worked with are these folks in Nigeria. They wake up ready to work every morning and they work late.
Mm-hmm.
They want to do the best job, right? So just really helping them clarify. And then we stay on this. My planning style is we do annual planning, we do
Mm-hmm.
quarterly planning, and we do monthly planning, and we kind of work our way that direction. So right now they're working specifically on really honing their marketing because it's something that we told them like we're not going to be able to provide a lot of this ongoing support for you.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have to own the whole part of the business, but we can then start making more referrals to you guys because we're focused with our work. So that's a little bit of how we stay in the loop with them. And obviously the referral agreements that we have with them are really strong. It's just a way for us to continue to link our ecosystem um, all together to support one another.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Talk to me about when you realized communities you were serving already had the ideas of work ethic, kind of like these African partners, how that can transfer in the classroom with the right structure and support for teachers who are working with project-based learning or student entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I think we might be breaking up. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, cool. Um, Yeah, I think when I think a teacher, and this is where I think Build is brilliant. I think
Mm-hmm.
they're one of we used to use junior achievement in the school.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was the same. It was very, very brilliant stuff. But beyond just doing a classroom, kind of like a curriculum based thing, I think the simple ways that we can help teachers help their students in this way is to really help like actually give them an assignment to clarify what they actually see as an opportunity. You
Mm-hmm.
know, and like what I did with our friends in Nigeria, it was they came up with a couple of ideas early on, and I said to them, what about all these other problems that you're not thinking about, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's a loving conversation that's poking holes in their ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And if we set up that conversation, we set up that conversation in a very structured way where it's like, look, I want this to be successful. I want you guys to live into your vision.
Mm-hmm.
But you have assumptions that you haven't thought about, and you have these you're not going to see some of the things that could trip you up down the road. So the
Mm-hmm.
questions I'm about to ask you are specifically designed to help you see the full picture so that as you're stepping forward in this project, we can move it forward. So really, I think at the top of a project-based learning, we actually have to help the clarification, not just of what is the problem statement. Is that a clean sentence?
Mm-hmm.
We actually have to go deeper on that stuff. We have to take them further into the why does this problem exist? Who has this problem? What does it feel like? What do they think? You know, you're starting to help them build their entire client profile, if you will.
Mhm.
Like, who is this ideal person and what do they feel, think, and do, right? With
Mhm.
when they get our solution, what do we want that for them to, what's the existence we want for them? And now we actually can help them build sequentially towards building these solutions in a comprehensive way, and it has a higher likelihood of success at that point. And it actually positions the teacher, the parent, the volunteer more as a mentor and a coach
Mhm.
than like a an instruction giver, like a content just just delivering content at the student. Like, here's the how to. Help let them discover it themselves, let them build that,
Mhm.
and you can then turn more into a coaching behind the scenes. There's going to be content drip,
Mhm.
100%. We're
Mhm.
going to have to give content of why this is the way it is, but the more we can actually help them fail their way forward, the
Mhm.
better that product will be, the better that service will be, the more ownership they will take in it. And I
Mhm.
think that is the key for all of this to really take root. We have to be thinking of how do we give students more ownership, not
Mhm.
just more voice. Because if if they're creating the problem and they can create the solution, and we need to let them own both sides of that and support them in that journey.
Mhm. Mhm. Talk to me a little bit about challenges that nonprofits face often when it comes to sustainability and how creating revenue generating ventures can address that.
Yeah, this is a big passion of mine. I think what I have learned in the 20 plus years of nonprofit work is that the ones that are really going after it well can grow that nonprofit activity
Mhm.
to scale. The problem is that the funding models often cannot keep up with that success. And so
Mhm.
it's a little bit of one of these like catch 22s, like, do we put a cap on our growth? Because our funding model is fundraising. So we're fully dependent on outside resources to fund the work that we're doing.
Mhm.
And that's an awesome component to what a nonprofit does because we're bringing a lot of people into a vision with us.
Mhm.
The challenge, though, becomes we're cutting paychecks so that we can have the supplies that we need for this program over here. You're constantly making really hard, life-altering decisions to
Mhm.
move the needle of social impact. And so what I'm recognizing, and then the other part of that too is that I have a big rabbit trail that we could go down another time, but I just think that some of the philanthropy models are broken. It's like, why are some organizations able to secure some of these grants and others are not? There's a reason why there's
Mhm.
access there, right? And so, and the way some of the philanthropists are looking and evaluating things is not as comprehensive, in my opinion, as it really needs to be. So part of what this comes down to is, look, I mean, even like the Nigeria story is the best one we have right now because it's just such a like a hand in glove situation.
Mhm.
It's like, well, we know how to drive impact. We know how to train people for employment and how to
Mhm.
find jobs and how to get ready for that. And we can do this in villages all across the continent. We can't pay for it.
Mhm.
And so my partners kept saying, "Hey, can you fund this? Can you help connect us to this?" Like, man, like at some point, this is a leaky bucket. Money comes in and
Mhm.
it's spent, right? So there's no cycle of renewal. There's no growth plan. So beginning to identify how can we make any of these programs self-sufficient is a really important question for executive directors to begin to tackle. We
Mhm.
live in a different world. It's not like mom and dad's, our parents' generation that gave thousands of dollars. We are now in a situation where there's a bazillion opportunities and people are giving 25 cents to every single thing that they see. So you
Mhm.
can't build a budget on that. It's really complicated. It's really hard. And so we have to begin to identify these self-sufficient processes inside of our programs. It doesn't replace
Mhm.
fundraising, and it never should, because it's really important from a vision perspective. Less so, I mean, the money's really important, don't get me wrong.
Mhm.
Having other people vest into a social impact project has two parts of benefit. It's the money for sure, because it helps fund the programming, but it's also the investment of their mind and their creativity. I can't tell you how many times in the last quarter I have called donors of our nonprofit for
Mhm.
counsel. I'm
Mhm.
like, I'm stuck, and because I'm in the weeds, and you guys are brilliant minds, like you're in this, vocation, you're in this vocation. This is why I'm calling you. not because I need more money. I mean, I always need more money as a nonprofit leader. I need your wisdom, right? So I think there's always going to be that benefit for both.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Talk to me a little bit about SolveLine, which is a virtual assistant with the skills of an operation manager. Unpack kind of how that works in your operations department.
Yeah, so part of why we structured Solveline the way we did is it's its own separate company that I
Mm-hmm.
just get to be an advisor for.
Okay.
And so they kind of live in, so the reason we've separated everything out is those teams need to take ownership of that program and well, of that business. So they own the business. So they get distributions and everything from profits, whatever. But they can't be dependent on, like if Pulse doesn't work, right? Their livelihood cannot be dependent on one project.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what Pulse is doing as we're getting ready to launch, we will have a contract in place with Solveline for very specific sections of the business. So
Okay.
things like our social media, things like our customer success, just monitor the emails and flag me when am needed. Redirect, it's kind of more triaging the emails back to the
Mm-hmm.
development team, right? So things like that, where we have a very specific job scope with them.
Mm-hmm.
They take that and then they bill us out and they say, okay, well, we're $25 an hour. These projects are going to take us about 10 hours a week. So this is what we're going to be billing Pulse on a monthly basis.
Mm-hmm.
We sign that scope of work. We sign that contract with them. It's typically they're starting us with a 3 month locked in, and then we go month to month from there. What's great about that is we're going to be able to flex. Well, startup world is hard, so my
Mm-hmm.
needs are going to change every week.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're going to have a lot of flexibility to say, okay, this week I need more help here, less help here, and they can flex to that kind of workflow. So they
Mm-hmm.
do that same thing with every other client that they have. So it really is month to month with them. And then depends on their hours that they're working, and then they just bill accordingly.
Okay. Okay. In terms of Pulse, which is getting ready to launch this spring, where do you see it in 5 years, and who do you see using it and the impact it will have?
Yeah, so we're starting right now with schools, and for a number of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
One of those is that if we're really wanting to have systemic impact in a community, like all families are tied to a school somewhere, right? So we
Mm-hmm.
want to serve schools in a brilliant way. So I think in 5 years, I'd like to see that the adoption has really gone across the board in terms of usage, but
Mm-hmm.
not just the usage of it, but I'd like to see some of the trends of, I want to see grades going up in a community. I
Mm-hmm.
want to see, when we saw a study, Dana, not too long ago that broke my soul. It was that, prisons are being mapped out. Where should we build prisons based on the
Mm-hmm.
third grade reading average in a community?
Mm.
And I said, wow, if that is true, then how do we actually break that cycle? Let's help
Yeah.
improve the school's reading programs at the third grade level.
Mm-hmm.
This is an atrocious reality. And
Mm-hmm.
so, how do we actually tool that up that way? So, I think schools are using it. Obviously, I'm a big proponent of the nonprofit that we work in. We have very large plans for how we plan to use it to not just monitor our impact to see are we on track, but to be wiser with how we're distributing resources to the field,
Mm-hmm.
to specific communities where they're needed the most. So it's an impact monitoring and resource distribution thing for us. I also have friends that have said that there's a lot of business use cases for this.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things I've learned in the 20 plus years of work is you got to stay laser focused coming
Mm-hmm.
out of the gate. So we're locked in on schools and making teachers' lives awesome and improving the overall livelihood of our students in the communities where we serve.
Well, you're going to be speaking in the fall, possibly at some conferences. Talk to me about where people can find you.
Yeah, so if you come to pulseconnect.us, that's our
Mm-hmm.
website for Pulse, and we'll be putting out information about where I might be speaking later this fall. There's some conferences in South Carolina, New York, Dallas. So we're looking across all of the ed tech space, as well as some of the school-based spots. We're looking at putting booths up where people can try on the voice responder and the report builders and all of the things that we have in this wonderful Swiss Army knife tool for schools.
Great. Well, we've had a great conversation today around Pulse, nonprofit work, outsourcing, and really finding donors and everything that goes into working in this space. Out of everything we've talked about, what's one thing you'd like listeners to remember?
I really like the way you phrased that
Mm-hmm.
statement that the best solutions are actually living inside of the people we're already serving.
Mm-hmm.
And so my hope is that we would be able to turn our imaginations towards those individuals
Mm-hmm.
for the solutions that we really need and begin to co-create with them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Where can people find you online aside from pulseconnect.us?
So I'm on LinkedIn, so you can look me up there. Joe Paul Reed is my hashtag. There, you can also email me, joe@pulseconnect.us. Would love to connect with you.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being on the Out of the Trenches podcast. It was a pleasure learning more about Pulse and how it can serve educators.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.